Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for joining us for this special session focused on the lesser known villages of Bourgogne, those hidden gems that offer remarkable quality and exceptional value. My name is Christian Ogenfuss, co founder of Napa Valley Wine Academy, and one of only a handful of Bourgogne ambassadors. I've had the good fortune to travel to Bourgogne several times each year, meeting producers, walking the vineyards, and deepening my appreciation for the extraordinary region. Every visit reminds me that Bourgogne is not just a wine region, it's a living story. Few places on earth can match the depth of history or the centuries of experience that have shaped these wines. I'm also delighted to be joined today by Catherine Bouguet, co-founder of Napa Valley Wine Academy and our Vice President of Education. Catherine will be leading us through the tasting portion of today's presentation, helping us explore the sensory and stylistic diversity that defines these village appellations. As we explore the wines of Bourgogne, we'd love for you to share your thoughts and takeaways using the hashtag #BackToBourgogne, and you can also follow along and stay connected with us at Bourgogne Wines and at Napa Valley Wine Academy. Okay, let's dive in. Here's what we'll be covering today. I'll start with an overview of Bourgogne's key facts, terroir, classification system. Then we'll shift our focus to the village appellation, the true heart of Bourgogne's diversity. Finally, we'll taste through several of these wines with Catherine, bringing these stories to life in the glass. Few wine regions carry the same historical weight as Bourgogne. Centuries of tradition and deep respect for the land has given this region extraordinary advantage. Generations of experience crafting wines that express their terroir with absolute authenticity. From vineyard to glass, Bourgogne represents the perfect blend of heritage, craftsmanship, and place, a tapestry of soil, history, and human hands. This is a region whose vineyards, its climats, are so historically significant that they've been recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. That inscription is more than a title. It honors nearly 2,000 years of human endeavor and respect for terroir. It reminds us that every vine here stands on centuries of experience and intent. Let's begin with some perspective. Bourgogne may be modest in size, stretching only about 143 miles from north to south, but it's one of the most complex and diverse wine regions in the world. Within that narrow strip are 5 main wine growing areas: Chablis, the Grand Auxerrois, Côte de Nuits, Côte de Beaune, Côte de Chalonnaise, and the Mâconnais. Each area has its own personality, yet they all share a single mission: to express Pinot Noir and Chardonnay in the purest, most honest form. There are 84 appellations in Bourgogne. That's remarkable for such a small region. Many world famous, but others, like the villages we're focusing on today, fly under the radar. These lesser known appellations often sit right next to the great names, sharing similar soils, exposures, and traditions. They deliver the same craftsmanship, sometimes at a fraction of the cost. Another misconception about Bourgogne is that it's dominated by red wines. In fact, over 60% of production today is white, and mainly from Chardonnay. Red wines still hold prestige, of course, but Cremant de Bourgogne has seen steady growth over the last 3 decades, and Rosé, although a tiny portion of the volume, adds to the region's diversity. It's a reminder that Bourgogne isn't defined by color, it's defined by clarity of expression. Despite accounting for only 4% of France's total vineyard area, Bourgogne punches far above its weight. Its wines represent an impressive share of France's export value, thanks to their reputation for precision, longevity, and authenticity. It's proof that greatness often comes from small places. If there's one word that defines Bourgogne, it's terroir. Here, terroir is not just soil, it's the intricate balance between climate, soil, exposure, and the human touch. Each parcel, even no larger than a garden, has its own story, its own texture, minerality, and voice. That's why two vineyards separated by a stone wall can produce wines that taste completely different. Bourgogne producers also are looking forward. The region is pursuing carbon neutrality by 2035. It's a collective effort, reducing emission, innovating in packaging and freight, and ensuring sustainability for future generations. This commitment shows that respect for terroir extends far beyond the vineyard. It's about preserving the entire ecosystem. Now that we understand the land, let's talk about Bourgogne and how it organizes the classification system. Unlike Bordeaux, where classification is based on producers, Bourgogne ranks places. Every appellation is tied to a specific site, sometimes even a single vineyard. At the foundation, we have regional wines. A step up and you reach the village level, which is our focus today. Included in the village level are the Premier Crus. And finally, at the top of the pyramid, the Grand Crus. This hierarchy reflects not prestige for prestige's sake, but the intimate relationship between the vines and their exact place on the slope. Unlike Bordeaux, as I mentioned before, where classifications rank estates, Bourgogne ranks places. It's terroir. The foundation for this system dates back centuries, starting with early observations by monks and naturalists and eventually codified by the INAO in 1935. As elevations rise on the slopes, so does prestige. At the foot of the slope, you often find regional wines. Mid-slope, where drainage and sun exposure are ideal, you'll get Village and Premier Cru plots. Grand Cru vineyards sit in the sweet spot of perfect natural balance. Here we arrive at the heart of Bourgogne, the village appellation. There are 44 in total, each named for the village it surrounds. These wines represent the perfect balance between everyday accessibility and terroir-driven complexity. Every bottle bears the phrase Grand Vin de Bourgogne, a symbol of authenticity and regional pride. Many village appellations include Premier Cru vineyards, those that consistently express superior character. They are the sweet spot between accessibility and distinction. In 1935, when the INAO first established Bourgogne's appellations, there were only 3 levels: regional, village, and Grand Cru. The idea of Premier Cru didn't exist yet, even though certain vineyards were already recognized by merchants and collectors for producing exceptional wines that often sold at higher prices. During World War II, things changed. Under German occupation, wines were requisitioned for the army, but the Grand Crus were spared. Local producers quickly realized that their finest village climats could be classified like Grand Crus. Those wines would also be protected. So in 1944, they petitioned the INAO to add a special category within the village level, allowing those top sites to carry the term Premier Cru on the label. It was a brilliant solution born of necessity, and it remains one of Bourgogne's most defining distinctions today. Okay, now let's get back to the village appellations. You'll recognize them easily by the village name on the label: Gevrey, Rouy, Fizan, Saint-Brie, and in this example, Gevrey-Chambertin. Each village speaks its own accent, expressing the nuance of its soils and slope. For professionals like us, they are the wines that create discovery moments for customers, the ones that surprise and delight. The roots of Bourgogne's classification reach back centuries. It began with the monks of Citeaux, who meticulously mapped vineyards and documented differences in soils, exposures, and quality. They were, in many ways, the first terroir scientists. Back in the 16th and 18th century, the most sought-after wines in Bourgogne didn't come from vineyards we recognize today, but from urban centers like Dijon, Beaune, and Auxerre. A hierarchy existed: the wines from Dijon and Beaune at the top, and those from surrounding villages considered of lesser quality the farther you traveled from those cities. But by the 1700s, everything began to change. In 1788, wines started being valued by the exact place the grapes were grown. So names like Chambertin and Bailly began to surpass Dijon wines in both price and prestige. This was the birth of the idea of place as identity. During the 18th century, people stopped talking about Beaune wines and started celebrating Chambertin, Montrachet, Corton, Volnay, and Pommard, marking the beginning of Bourgogne's vineyard-driven reputation that still defines it today. In the 18th century, the Bourgogne wine trade began to take shape as we know it today. This was when the first négoce houses appeared in Neuilly and Beaune, names like Maury, Champy, and Bouchard. These merchants brought wines and aged them in their own cellars and sold them across France and throughout Europe. The commercial success helped popularize Bourgogne's idea of place-defining wines, that the vineyard or climat mattered as much as the producer. It was the négociants who built customer loyalty to those names and places that we still celebrate today. Around the same time, in 1728, Abbot Claude Arnaud became the first to describe the vineyards of the Côte d'Or. He mapped out the best hillsides and listed villages like Beaune, Volnay, Pommard, Neuilly, and Chambertin, ancestors of today's great appellations. By mid-century, even official wine price lists in Paris reference these villages and famous climats like La Romanée, Montrachet, and Corton. Only two kinds of wines were recognized: village wines and those elite climats that would later become Grand Cru. Meanwhile, smaller villages often sold their wines under the famous names, a tradition called equivalence, that, while practical, kept many hidden gems in the shadow for centuries. By the 19th century, Bourgogne négociants and scholars began to formalize what centuries of vignerons already knew: the land itself determined quality. Driven by the wine trade, they created the first vineyard classification. André Julien in 1819, Dr. Denis Merlot in 1831, and Dr. Jules Lavelle in 1855 each mapped and ranked Bourgogne vineyards into categories like Tête de Cuvée, Premier, Deuxième, and Troisième class. Their color-coded maps became the foundation of the systems we know today. Many of their top sites later became Grand Crus, most Premier and Deuxième class plots became village appellations, and the lower slopes evolved into regional AOCs. This 19th century work turned observation into structure and set the stage for Bourgogne's modern hierarchy of excellence. But not all villages had equal visibility. Some, like Gervais-Chambertin and Meursault, became famous early on. Other, equally capable, were overshadowed. For years, wines from these smaller villages, as I mentioned before, were sold under their better-known neighbors' names, a practice, as I mentioned, called equivalence. That's one reason why these villages still fly under the radar today, even though they share the same DNA of excellence. So why focus on these villages? Because they represent the authentic core of Bourgogne. They combine centuries of craftsmanship with a sense of place, purity, that connects directly with today's consumer. These are wines to champion, wines that tell the Bourgogne story in its truest form. So as we move into the tasting, keep this in mind. These are not lesser wines, they are less discovered wines. They represent the essence of Bourgogne: history, authenticity, and emotion in every glass. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Catherine, who will lead us through the tasting and help us experience the diversity of these incredible village appellations firsthand.
Thank you so much, Christian. I am thrilled to be talking about these wines today. These are lesser known appellations, which helps moderate the prices. As Christian shared, some of these village wines were sold under the name of a more renowned village, and they didn't get to build up their reputations as early. Now these wines, these village wines, can shine in their own right. And the wines that we showcase today, they weave together their own histories, terroirs, and people so that each wine we'll taste has its own personality. Our first stop is to Saint-Brie, an appellation in the cooler Chablis Grand Auxerrois region. This is an old stone-built village with medieval cellars running underneath, which many call the best of their kind in Bourgogne. Viticulture has been active here since the 1st AD, but the appellation is unique for another reason. This is the only district in Bourgogne for Sauvignon. So you can tell your customers they are drinking a one-of-a-kind Bourgogne wine when they have a Saint-Brie. The appellation is 100% white, and only Sauvignon and Sauvignon Gris are allowed. Sauvignon Gris is a pink mutation of Sauvignon Blanc. The climate is cool continental, so freshness and aromatics abound. But the River Yonne helps moderate, therefore aids in ripening. These Sauvignon wines are made in the style popular with U.S. consumers today: dry, refreshing, and fruity. We are about to taste one from Domaine Griveau-Goiseau, a family estate located in Saint-Brie since the 15th century. Generations succeed one another, and here we can see 3 generations at work. We know that consumers care about sustainability, and the family carefully tends to the vineyards. You can see here they hold the highest level of HVE, or high environmental value, which comes with the strictest level of regulations attached. Let's go ahead and taste this wine. There's aromatic intensity and freshness, which we would expect from the northern location. Mandarin orange, riper Meyer lemon, summer peach and passion fruit. There's a hint of salinity and mineral here, and I know not directly attached to the soils, but we have Portlandian and Kimmeridgian limestone soils here. Let's go ahead and taste this wine. A juicy higher acidity level here. I think the calcareous soils elevate the vibrancy of this wine. I think we never explain as educators why that's happening, but with calcareous soils, you inhibit the uptake of potassium, and therefore you retain acids, especially malic acids, leaving that vibrancy, that brightness in the wines. But did you feel that? I can feel it on my palate, that richness. Of course, we have some malolactic fermentation here that's going to add to the texture of the wine. It was aged for 11 months, so we've got some aging here. A few years of aging is actually great on these wines. You get a compote, preserved peaches or preserved fruit element with a few years of age. There is the Vin de Bourgogne website, has recipes, and don't go looking if you're hungry. I happened to see the Parmigiano Reggiano cannelli bean fritters on there, and I thought, I have to make these. And when you bite into them, I made them just this past weekend. When you bite into them, you've got this crusty exterior, but then the creamy cannelli bean interior. And it's just a beautiful bridge to the richness of the wine. But you make these fritters with this lemon zest, which is a great bridge to that beautiful citrus fruit that we find here. Anyway, a great pairing. Again, don't go on that website with the recipes if you're hungry. You're going to want to make everything. If we talk about this wine versus other wines that your customers could be buying, I like to think here that, this wine is not as pungent or aggressive as New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. And when it comes to California, you don't know what the style might be in the bottle, right? There's oaked versions, there's unoaked versions. And here, when you get Saint-Brie, you know what the style is going to be: dry, refreshing. You might have some richness that is from malolactic fermentation, but you generally know the style that you're going to get. So it just, brings some commonality for your consumers. Like, okay, I know I'm always going to get this style. Let's go ahead and drive down to Vézelay. It's roughly a 40-minute drive. Vines have been planted here since Roman times. During the Renaissance, the wines here had recognition as far as Paris. And in the 18th century, there were over 1,200 acres planted here. But the story of this wine is one that almost wasn't. By the end of the 1960s, there were only a few hectares left. Imagine if centuries of families' hard work was lost. Luckily, a dozen or so winemakers took up the baton and a renaissance in Vézelay began. And one of the families that's instrumental in the Vézelay appellation has made the wine that we're about to taste. It is from Domaine La Croix-Montjoie, and the name comes from the landmark cross, the Joy Cross, and the joy in finishing a journey, because a famous pilgrimage ends in Vézelay, and the final steps are a wide cobblestone street, dotted today with cafes and restaurants and shops that ascend to a hilltop abbey, which has long been believed and disputed to be the home of the remains of Mary Magdalene. Your customers may just enjoy the fact that when they put a bottle of this on their dining room table, they can tell the story of the Joy Cross. Proprietors Sophie and Mathieu, they're good friends of the Academy, our students that go visit them every year, but they're both qualified in agronomy and enology and are both from winemaking families. They aspired to start their own wine journey, and they came upon this old dairy farm with, a 19th century stone building on it, just beautiful property. And they knew that they had found not only their new home, but their wine's new home. Organic farming is practiced. And, interestingly, the vineyards, they're behind the winery, they're planted in a single block. This is so rare in Burgundy. I know you've heard that people own, different parcels, all over. So very, very rare. And this site has a special outdoor terrace where you're sitting in the beautiful sunshine, you sipping on these gorgeous wines. You've got the vineyard views spread out in front of you. There's live music events, tasting events. There's food that you can order. It's sort of a must stop when you visit. So let's go ahead and taste this wine. Wine number 2, if you have the wine kit. We're still in the we're still in the Chablis Grand Auxerrois area, so we can expect freshness and purity of fruit from the cooler climate here. But again, the Yonne River moderates extremes to aid in ripening. Ooh, the fruit is vibrant, fresh. We've got, when I say Meyer lemon, I know that we have those in California. If you don't have them, they're a riper type of lemon. So it's this beautiful, aromatic, riper lemon. But there's Asian pear, red apple. But there's also aromas of like baked pears or warm apples. Sort of spun with hints of almond and toast, beautifully melded. You can see here in the notes that some of the fermentation took place in older barrels, which really helps, meld that beautiful fruit and the older oak used together. Let's go ahead and taste this wine. The flavors have this lifted freshness. Do you get that beautiful freshness? There's higher acidity here, yet the palate's round and supple. You can see here we have partial malolactic, and the wine was aged for 9 months, 25% of that in older barrels, the rest in tank. Most Vézelay, the wine here, this is going to be sort of the big takeaway on this wine. The market price is $19. I mean, you're getting this gorgeous brightness and richness with all this fruit and a Bourgogne Village wine for $19. All right, let's go to our next stop, which is in the Macanais. We're going to Pouilly-Fuissé, and we're at the southern end of Bourgogne, and so we find Mediterranean influences here. It's going to be a bit warmer. The Pouilly-Fuissé appellation is named for 2 distinct villages, right? We've got the Solutre, Pouilly, and we have Fuissé. And those villages produce the wines as well as 2 others. Vergisson and Chantre. And the reason I mention that is because we are going to be tasting a wine from Vergisson. Two large limestone outcrops define the landscape here, the famous Solutre and the Vergisson. If you like to add activities to your wine travels, you can hike, you can climb these hills, and you're going to get stunning views. So beautiful. In fact, the wine that we're going to try in a minute is named Deux Roches, two rocks, after these two famous limestone outcrops. You can see here that the vineyards form a sort of amphitheater of limestone hills facing south and southeast, and that cocoons the grapes, trapping in that sunny, warm climate in the area. Let's go ahead and zoom in where we're going to find the Premier Cru site that our next wine is from. There are 22 Premier Cru climats, and the wine we are showcasing is from one called Sur la Roche, so on the rock. And again, we're in Vergisson. Here is a photo image of that Premier Cru location, which I love to look at. You see here it extending up towards the Vergisson limestone outcrop. Deux Roches is managed by two families. And go ahead and taste the wine while I share a few more points. But Deux Roches is managed by two families created by childhood friends who then married sisters. But there's a lovely story. If you go onto their website, there's a lovely story with a generational history going back to 1928, and sort of, the story of a simple tenant farmer who was making goat cheese. His son took over that goat cheese production and the farming. Anyway, it's just a beautiful story and a reminder that there's so many success stories, that start with humble beginnings. Anyway, let's go ahead and taste this wine. Ooh, richly intense aromatics. I mean, no surprise given, right? We have this Premier Cru location and it's southeast facing Limestone Hill. So we get, do you smell the riper, warmer peaches? There's even a smell of some juicy pineapple. I'm going to taste it. I mean, there is beautiful, ripe peaches, riper citrus, that pineapple we just talked about, that richness. I mean, I think we can expect some concentration. You see the notes, right here. The vines are an average age of 68 years old. But still, there's good acidity. Do you feel that? I mean, if we're talking WSET, I'd call it medium plus. But anyway, just great juicy acidity. And you can see the winemaking includes malolactic, which softens that acidity, adds that creamy texture. 19 months on the fine lees, which is going to add that complexity that we're getting. Toast and white pepper spice, so you're getting that beautiful spice note. I mean, the wine is aged in 10 months in barrels and another 9 months in tank. So that's opulent, no? Isn't that beautiful? I mean, this is a rich, sunny wine. I'm just going to peg this as our vacation in a glass. Let's go ahead and go north to the Côte Chalonnaise, where we're going to find some key villages such as Roulis, Mercurey, Givry, Montigny. There has been winemaking here since the Middle Ages. Are you starting to see a theme in Bourgogne of long tradition and commitment? So one of the Dukes of Bourgogne owned a chateau here, and his influence, along with a powerful abbey, gave the wines here some great prominence. These wines were well known. There is actually a chateau in Roulis that, it has been in the same family for 6 generations. Beautiful place to visit. The wines here are a fantastic value. The moderate climate allows for richness along with balanced brightness. I can't recall where I heard this, but it stuck with me. Roulis produces, Roulis that's produced on the hilly slopes can compete with the best of the Côte de Beaune. That's a big statement. We will be tasting a wine from Le Clu, the Premier Cru site pictured here. The story is a wine entwined with the history of Roulis, the village appellation. Pictured here is Elaine, the proprietor of the chateau and the wine we're about to taste. Her great-grandfather played a huge role in the creation of the Roulis Village appellation. So, and that happened in the 1930s. But her family has roots in Roulis going back to the 16th century. Let's go ahead and taste our Premier Cru, Le Clu. And since we're in the Côte Chalonnaise, we have a moderate climate, generally the same climate you have in the Côte d'Or. So we can expect some concentration due to the Premier Cru site, right? We've got a favorable hilly slope, so we can expect some great concentration and ripeness. And oh, warm. Do you get that warm, ripe red apples? Beautiful. And some quince here, some beautiful quince, still pears. There's a beautiful sort of aroma of honeysuckle, some white floral here. This wine has aged into a nice complexity. I mean, in 2022, but it's, well, let's go ahead and taste. Oh, wow, that's a juicy basket of apples, but like all different varieties. You've got some riper ones, you've got some juicier, sort of tangy ones. That is beautiful. The hint of honey and white pepper. Are you getting that tiny little bit of spice on the finish? And the nice roundness on the palate. I mean, it was aged on its lees, for 18 months, you see here. So rounded, but also very, very lively. So our Roulis. Let's go ahead and return to the Chablis Grand Auxerrois, to the village of Irancy. Vines here were mentioned in a manuscript from 861. 861. We are in close proximity to our new favorite Sauvignon from Saint-Brie. Here, the hilly slopes are nestled, you see, sort of in a bowl, overlooking the Yonne River, facing south. So the river moderates the extremes. We get a mild, sunny microclimate. Ripens Pinot Noir well here. While Pinot Noir is the key grape here, and we're moving on to reds, we also here are allowed to use up to 10% of a traditional grape from the region, César. César, as the name may imply, if you're thinking Caesar, was brought by Roman legions here and prized for producing wines of great color. We'll be tasting a wine from Delphine and Gregory. Both are from Bourgogne, and she from a family of Bourgogne winemakers. But Gregory, he also serves as technical director of Domaine La Roche in Chablis. And maybe you've heard, that's a well-known producer in Chablis. He also consults in Portugal. So this project is relatively youthful and artisanal in scale, showing just a different side, of producers here. So let's go ahead and taste our first red, our Irancy. Oh, so engaging. There's a depth, right away. You're getting so many different things. But ripe red cherry, raspberry, red plum. Lovely. There's even some black plum here. Oh, I want to hear what you're getting from the wines. I'll be able to read it maybe in the comments. Great aromatics are not diminished. You see here, there's, no fining, no filtration. Oh, and do you get that earthiness and spice? We see here that, 20% of stem inclusion, probably helping to give us some of that nice spicy character. Used barrels are chosen, 4 to 10 uses for 12 months. I'm going to go ahead and taste. Ooh, firm, youthful tannins. Mostly feeling them along my gum line, so I wouldn't mark them as high. It's a beautiful level of tannin. Makes me still crave some like spare ribs or barbecued chicken, barbecued anything really. The body has some nice weight to it. Did you feel? It really balancing that vibrancy, because this is a refreshing wine. I mean, this is sort of I can picture drinking this wine in all types of climates, in all different weather. including the summers, just such vibrancy here. But then you've got some warmth in that tannin structure, so a great winter wine as well. The nice thing about Irancy is that they can age, 3 to 10 years. And this wine, sort of on the market, $28. You're getting this beautiful Pinot Noir, maybe with a percentage of César, but beautiful wine, right? With some structure, and yet all this beautiful giving, these red fruits with a little black fruit and this spice, and you're getting all of that for 28. Incredible. So we made a stop earlier in Rouly, and now we're going to return to the Côte Chalonnaise, to Givry, known for its elegant reds. Kings and the Pope have something common here. So Givry was a favorite of King Henri IV, but also these wines were being shipped to Avignon, to the Pope. Online chatter today shows Psalms talking about the crazy value of these wines. I mean, just for a moderately priced, Village Rouge. Givry produces more red than white. You can see some facts here. And if you've heard of Givry, and it was some time ago, these are not the rustic wines of yore. In fact, Veronique Drouhin, if you know the famous Drouhin family from the area, she calls these wines the most Volnay of all the ones in the Côte Chalonnaise because they're silky and full of flavor. I could see sales pitches, maybe the everyman's Volnay or the weekday Volnay, but let's not really do that because we want the name Givry to shine. We want this Village, level wine to be known. But anyway, it gets a great recommendation from Veronique Drouhin. So let's go ahead. I'm just going to pull out my wine as I share a few more facts. In fact, here you can see our Givry is from Domaine Michel Sarrazin et Filles, a family estate that goes back to the 17th century. Michel's 2 sons, as well as their children, are now involved in the production. The domain, you can see here, holds the highest HVE level, that HVE 3 that we discussed, right, with the strictest regulations. Ooh, again, deep aromatics, dark fruits, more dark fruits here in this wine, blackberry, black cherries, but still there's some red plum, red cherries. We'd love to see what you're getting. There are also spices, clove, anise or licorice. I mean, the wine spent 12 months aging in barrel with another 2 in the tank. The oak is beautifully integrated in the wine. I happened to taste it earlier. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the oak is just beautifully integrated in the wine. Firm but silky tannins. I mean, again, those, on the palate, that the clove and the nutmeg are coming through. And there's some weight on this wine, right? It's a bit weightier. And so that, with the structure of the tannins, this is a different expression of Pinot Noir, from our Irancy, which was from, a cooler area up north. So a beautiful, same grape variety, but with a completely different expression. So it would be rude to tour Bourgogne and not stop in the Côte de Beaune. So let's head to Le Doigt. Underestimated wines is what one formidable Bourgogne expert calls them. Le Doigt sits, you can see on this picture here, it sits at the foot of the famous Corton Hill. Le Doigt shares with the Lox Corton and Pernon Vergelès the honor of producing famous wines on the hill of Corton. Yet, and this is big, the market price for these wines is, instead of hundreds and thousands, it's around $40. $40 for a famous location. But, let's taste the wine and we can talk about that some more. I think we should let others fixate on the Corton's Grand Cru. But let's see. You see here some numbers. Le Doigt produces both red and white wines. This photo is from a cellar of our next wine, which is from Domaine Maillard Père et Fille. I imagine having a dinner party here, opening up a Ladois and sipping it amongst bites of maybe Parma ham or maybe some braised rabbit or a stewed chicken. Anyway, while the winery dates back to 1952 with Daniel Maillard, the family's heritage goes back to 1766. Today, the winery is run by his sons, Alain and Pascal. You can see some notes here. Sustainable viticulture is practiced, and the domain pays attention to the lunar calendar. For instance, they go ahead and they bottle when the moon is favorable. So the vineyard is Les Chailloux, is appreciated and named after its stony soils. It's well situated. You're going to love this. It sits next to an Alox Corton Premier Cru vineyard. So let's go ahead and taste this wine. Again, deep aromas, heady aromas here. Ooh, but there's like a sultry smelling fruits like cherry compote or brandied cherries. Ooh, beautiful. Ooh, a nice weight here again, a beautiful weight, but with that underlying freshness that we find in all of these wines. Higher acidity here. Do you feel that juiciness? We can see from the winemaking here, 18 months of aging and 50% new barrels, which can explain I'm feeling some sort of clove, maybe some dark coffee, on the finish here. And the impact is increased. You see there's smaller barrel usage with this wine. Look, Ladois Village wines can drink beautifully 3 to 4 years after bottling, but you can keep them for 10, 12 years. So Ladois. Now we arrive at our final stop on today's whirlwind tour, Fissan, in the Côte de Nuits. Of course we had to stop here. It's the Pinot Noir kingdom of the world. Although I hope you see the royal treasures that are Saint-Brie, Vézelay, Pouilly-Fuissé, Rouy, Givry, Irancy. There's so much here and so many different expressions using the same grape variety. Anyway, Fissan sits between the city of Dijon and Gevrey-Chambertin. Of course, Gevrey-Chambertin being a very well-known red wine. Lucky for us, Fissan is lesser known, so we can expect some consumer-friendly prices. I had to include a lovely shot of the Fissan village. Just the Fissan village is just so lovely. Production is mostly red here. The wines have a balance of power and finesse, like its neighbor in Gevrey-Chambertin. Some call these wines winter wines because they benefit from some aging over the winter. In a minute, we'll be tasting a wine from Fissan from a Premier Cru. So that the Premier Cru is the Clos du Chapitre, a monopole, which means that it's owned completely by the family. This is one of only 5 Premier Cru in Fissan. Let's taste our final wine from Domaine Guy et Yvonne Dufoulère. Guy calls he and his son owners and harvesters. I think that's quite humbling given the fact, that we're in the Côte de Nuits with some of the most famous Pinot Noir wines of the world. But let's go ahead and smell this wine. Again, not surprised by the deep concentration of aromas with this site here. We've got this Premier Cru site, which of course is going to have favorable, maximum sun, beautiful location. I think winemaking adds to this as well. You see here we've had a pre-soak, brings out aromas and flavors. And the age of the vines, look here, there's an average of 65 years old, adds to that concentration. I'm sure we're going to taste that on the palate. Ooh, dark blackberry fruit here, spices like black pepper, clove, nutmeg, There's a deep toastiness. So you're getting that nice toastiness. But how beautifully integrated is that with the fruit? I mean, 1/3 new oak barrels were used here for 12 months of aging. Firm tannins. But do you notice? I'm going to do that again. Yeah, those firm tannins are followed by this juicy burst of fruit. And there's some redder fruit added, on the palate, the red cherries, raspberry, along with, the blackberry still, some black currant. Beautiful fruit here, depth of fruit. And there's roundness. That's a long finish, a very, very long finish too, adding to that depth and complexity of this wine. So when we talk about this wine and its Premier Cru site, and we're in the Côte de Nuit, we can expect this on the market is about $89. I mean, again, when you think of other Premier Cru, and Grand Cru, and the hundreds and thousands of dollars that they cost, I mean, this has incredible structure. This will age. It's got the length and the depth and the complexity. A different, yet another expression of Pinot Noir. I hope you feel like I do. I mean, these are wines with souls behind them. We've been sharing the stories, the histories, and these are more moderately priced Bourgogne wines. I mean, people know Bourgogne, they love Bourgogne, but sometimes may feel that it's not approachable price-wise. And we're proving otherwise today. I mean, these are beautiful. These village wines are worth seeking out. And we tasted different expressions, especially when it came to the same grape variety, right? We love our Sambre, but when it came to the Chardonnays, did you see that we had different expressions of Chardonnay? And when it came to the Pinot Noirs, the same thing. Different sort of, fruit profiles, different, levels of acidity, always acidity, refreshingness, but in different levels and different, firmness of the tannins, there's just differences in each of these wines, really giving consumers lots of different choices. And when we talk about the prices of these wines, I know I shared some of them, but like the Sambre, 22, the Vézelay, 19. I mean, for such a beautiful wine, right? The Pouilly Fouissé, $37. The Roulis, 39. Irancy, 28. That was our first red that we were tasting, the Irancy. The Givry, 42. Le Doigt, 40. The Fissan, as I just mentioned, 89. These are incredibly approachable prices. I mean, look, for the least expensive one, 19, you're getting I'm still just so excited, about this wine and about the fruit that it gave and the freshness, yet there was richness on the palate. So many great choices. We have a few other things we'd love to share with you today. If you're like me, I adore maps, and I like to see where a wine is from. Maps is actually the number one thing that our students look at in our online resources for our school. But Vin de Bourgogne has a complete list of maps, of Bourgogne maps, and not just any maps. I mean, these, you can search and zoom in. You can search in Appellations, and you can then zoom in to see where their Premier Cru sites are. You can see, where they sit. I mean, this is just maps on maps. So really, and not only that, but when you zoom in, you can also find producers. You can find festivals and events. I think this is Bourgogne / maps.fr. And of course, we'll be sharing that with you. So great site to explore and get to see the visuals of where these wines, where these climats, fall in Bourgogne. Okay, this place. If you go to Bourgogne, it is a must to visit. This is a tasting and an educational center like no other. And I've visited quite a few. There are visual and interactive stations all around this large space that bring like the climate and the slopes to life. You go to one and you're seeing, the effects of the slopes. You walk into another room and you're seeing the weather year round and how that affects not only the vineyard, but then you see what it does in the soils. I mean, it's just incredible. And there's 3 locations. I'll share them here. Yeah, we take our students to the one in Beaune, but you can see here that there's 3 total locations. I mean, really, if you want to tour and see these incredible displays, or you want a tasting experience, this is just an incredible, incredible visit. I can't say enough about it. Now here, there's a lot on this screen. So go ahead and maybe take a screenshot, or you'll see this screen again, because we'll send out the recorded version of this session. But there's so many resources at your tips. I'm going to leave this slide up for a minute, but I do want you to take note of for those of you who got the wine kit, there is a card inside that has a QR code. I've circled it here. And so if you go ahead, if you would, we would love to hear from you. So love to hear about, the experience today, anything we can improve and do differently next time, right? The Vin de Bourgogne, they want to know, they want to hear directly from you. So please, if you would take a few minutes, we'd be really appreciative of that. So I'll continue to leave this slide up, but perhaps we have some questions. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, we do actually. Let's bring Christian back on as well. So the first question then is: we've got a lot of buyers here. So as buyers, how do we find the wines that we like? How do we find the Bourgogne wines that we think would be good for our customers, for our restaurants, for sales and things?
Well, I mean, first of all, you heard those prices, right? I mean, it's just, it's so incredible that Bourgogne, so famously known, as I just mentioned, but you can get some at moderate prices. And there's a price range for everyone. You saw I went from $19 to $89. There's a price range, for almost everyone. I think what helps is education, right? Is a lot of the things that you can see on these links here can help you, be able to sort of understand, the region and what's happening here. Watch again Christian's version, because he gave such great information, on how things came about. But I think this is important for consumers to know that, look, there's a ribbon of commonality here, right? We've got mostly Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. Yes, we have some specialties like our Sambre, our Sauvignon, but for the most part, most of the wines are Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And so if you know the styles, the general styles of, say, Chardonnay, I mean, Bourgogne Chardonnay is famous around the world because it has that balance of freshness and richness, right? And its winemaking techniques, right? Fermenting in the barrel, whether it's full or, partial malolactic, aging in the barrel. These techniques have been copied around the world because they create this beautiful, freshness and richness. But of course, the wines in Bourgogne have that, have these terroirs that give them not only different expressions, but again, that same ribbon of freshness and richness that can't be done, everywhere in the world. So I think that if you love Chardonnay, and that these styles here, that, how they generally make the wines in Bourgogne. And interestingly, I think that, it is that the Bourgogne wines are this beautiful, they have this beautiful integration of the oak, any oak use, and there's a lot of older oak use, but when there's even newer oak use, there's a beautiful intertwining of the fruit and the oak. These are wines that it's not like this overripe fruit with a dollop of oak on the top. That is absolutely not Bourgogne. So if you enjoy the beautiful, gorgeous expression of Chardonnay, whether you choose, any of the wines that we had here today, right? If you choose the Vézelay or you choose the Pouilly Fuissé, there's different expressions of it, but you're still going to come back to that freshness and richness with this beautiful fruit. And the same goes for the Pinot Noir. I know, I'm carrying on. Any other questions?
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Apart from
if I could briefly, I think one
Yes.
important thing to note about these wines is their authenticity. And I think today's consumer, especially younger consumers, are looking for authenticity and they're looking for sustainability. And these wines deliver on all those points, as well as history. So these wines are also vehicles in which to tell a story. They tell a story in a glass, but it's also an opportunity for people dealing with consumers at the front line to tell stories as well. And you've eloquently told some of those stories, Catherine. And I think that's the opportunity here, right? Not just repeating that a billionaire bought a vineyard in Napa, but these are young people with a lot of energy doing new things in an old region, built on a ton of history. So the authenticity here really runs deep. So I just wanted to interject that.
Yes. Oh my God. Great ad. Thank you, Christian.
Yeah, very well put, I think. I suppose Bourgogne's got a lot of competition out there, particularly for Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. And so, how do we, as buyers, how do we position Bourgogne wines against places like California, Australia, New Zealand for these varieties?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think oftentimes, especially where Pinot Noir and Chardonnay are concerned, we want to make those comparisons. Well, how is it? This is very Burgundian in style. We often say about an Oregon, or maybe sometimes about a Californian or a New Zealand wine, and I think that's really doing a disservice, because there is no other region like Bourgogne that look. It has 2,000 years of history, 2,000 years of know-how, 2,000 years of working these vineyards and these vines. No other region can come even close. Again, authenticity, right? Lineage, history, stories. These are all things that Bourgogne wines have to offer that New Zealand wines don't, Oregon wines don't, and Napa wines don't. I think we're doing a disservice not only to Bourgogne when we make those comparisons, but we're also doing a disservice to the other regions. And so I would urge you not to try to make those easy comparisons. There is still so much to discover in Bourgogne, right? 84 appellations spread over 143 miles, different climates from continental to Mediterranean influence. You have such, if you think of it as an artist's palette, you have so much to choose from, and diversity to choose from that no other region can compare to. So I know I'm a little bit on a soapbox, but it's also a very much a true statement.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Great. Catherine, thanks so much
Yes.
for leading us through this amazing tasting. Your
Oh,
energy and your enthusiasm were obviously inspired by the wines in the glass. We hope that everyone who joined us today on this webinar takes something away, a new story to take away, a new inspiration to take away, and a newfound energy for these lesser known villages that you've been able to experience today from Bourgogne. Again, don't forget to fill out that, scan your QR code if you got a kit, and fill out the survey. Really important for us. You can always reach out to us here at the Academy as well if you need more information, at support@NapaValleyWineAcademy.com. And we thank you so much for your time. We know it's precious, and we hope to see you on another webinar very soon.